In this video, we are going to look at bar charts. You're going to learn how to draw and interpret bar charts. Just like pie charts, bar charts are diagrams used to represent data. Here's a definition. A conventional bar chart is a plot of vertical bars. Each bar represents a well-defined subset of a collection of data. Furthermore, the height of the bars are proportional to the frequency of the data they represent. What this means is, well, directly proportional, to be honest, because the larger the height of a bar, the larger the frequency of the class it represents. So it's a similar idea to the size of the angle of a sector within a pie chart. You know that a larger angle for a sector represents a larger frequency for the class that sector represents. So by well-defined subset or categories, this is what I mean. Imagine you have a category representing the months in a year. Members of that category are months like January, February, up until December. Another category could be sports. Someone could be carrying out a survey to find out the favorite sport of a certain group of people, and you could give them options such as hockey, soccer, American football, basketball. So these are all categories. So here's an example of a bar chart, and this particular example represents the revenue and profit of a certain company for the first 4 months of a year. So imagine there's a certain company, and in January they make a certain amount of revenue, so the amount of money they receive from all their sales, and they also make a certain amount of profit out of that revenue. In every other month in the year, they will also have a revenue and a profit. So in February, they also have some sort of revenue and profit. Same thing in March, the same thing in April. Now, say this information was given, so the numbers were given. These numbers could be used to plot this bar chart. So what we're going to do now is use this bar chart to determine the numbers. So the first thing to note is this vertical axis represents either the revenue or profit for the company, and the horizontal axis represents months of the year. So this two bars here represent revenues and profits for January. The first bar, which is this purple, dark purple one, represents revenue. As you can see, dark purple is for revenue in billions of naira. This light purple bar represents the profits for the month of January. So for this case, the revenue in January is 5 billion naira. So this axis here has units of billions of naira. This is the month of February. Again, you can see that the revenue is given by this purple bar. This time the revenue is 20 billion naira. Here for the lilac bar, you can see that the profit is somewhere between 5 and 10, more like 8 billion naira. So this group of bars here represent the revenue and profits for the month of March, and this last group represents the revenue and profit for the month of April. So say you were given this bar chart and you were asked to find the revenue for the month of February of this company. All you have to do is go to the month of February. So these two bars represent either the revenue or profit for the month of February, and then you go to the bar representing revenues, which is the darker purple bar, and you just have to read off the revenue amount from the vertical axis, and as you can see, the height of the bar corresponds to this 20, and this 20 represents 20 billion naira. So that's the revenue for the company in the month of February. If you wanted to determine the profit for the company in the month of April, all you have to do is go to the bars representing the month of April, locate the bar representing profits, which is this, the bar colored in this lilac color, which is this one here, and just read off the value from the vertical axis, which is somewhere here. So if we actually work this out, it would be something like 4. So it's something like 4 billion naira. Now, using this bar chart, you can actually determine the total revenue from January to April, because all you have to do is work out the revenue for January, which is 5, work out the revenue for February, which is 20, work out the revenue for the month of March, which you can read off from this axis if you actually had this plotted, and work out the revenue for the month of April, which you can also read off from this axis as some value here between 10 and 15, which is probably like 12. And all you have to do is just add up all the revenues. You can do the same thing for profits. If you wanted to find the profit from January to April, you have to find what profit this bar represents, which is somewhere here, which is about 1 billion naira. What profit this bar represents, which is somewhere here, it's about 8 billion naira. Again, the profit that this bar represents, which is about 3 point something billion naira, and also the profit that this bar represents, again, somewhere around 4 billion naira. And all you have to do is add them up. So that's pretty much how you interpret bar charts. But the key thing here is it's a plot of bars. The vertical bars correspond to, in this case, the revenues or the profits for the company in a certain month. As you can see, the higher bars, basically, the larger the height of a bar, the larger the amount of money it represents. You can tell that in the month of February, this bar here, which has a much larger height than this bar, because this bar has a much larger height than this bar, you can tell that the revenue for the month of February is much larger than the revenue in the month of January. Because the bar here, representing profits for March, has a smaller height than the bar representing the profits for February, you can tell that the profits in the month of March are much less than the profits made in the month of February for this particular company. So that's just a good way to introduce you to the use and interpretation of bar charts. But we're going to look at a few more examples. But the key thing here, I'm just trying to stress, is it represents information regarding categories of data or a well-defined subset. So in this case, months in the year. These are the categories: January, February, March, and April. The conventional bar chart you will encounter will be a plot of frequency against some categories. For instance, in this case, we can have frequency on the vertical axis. So each of these numbers here represents a frequency. And on the horizontal axis, we have categories. So categories, the category in this case is sport. And you have soccer, basketball, table tennis, and boxing. So this bar chart could represent the results of a survey where a certain number of people, I'm just going to call that number NT, which means total number. We're going to work it out actually. So a survey is carried out and these are the results. And the question asked is, just tell me your favorite sport from the following four. So pick a sport from soccer, basketball, table tennis, and boxing. And here are the results. Now, this first bar represents the results from, it basically tells you how many people chose soccer as their favorite sport. And you can determine the number of people that like soccer by looking at the frequency. And that's 20. And that corresponds to the height of the bar. So this tells us that 20 people chose soccer. That's 20 people. The second bar tells us that 30 people, as you can see from the height of the bar, 30 people chose basketball. This bar tells us that 40 people chose table tennis. And this bar tells us that 10 people chose boxing. So the question now is, how many people were surveyed? Well, since everybody gave a response, we know that total number of people must be equal to 20 plus 30 plus 40 plus 10. Basically, it must be equal to the total number of responses. So it's 20 plus 30, which is 50, plus 40, which is 90, plus 10, which is 100. And these are the kind of questions you can be asked. They can ask you what's the total number of people surveyed, or total number of, basically they usually tend to ask for the total frequency in disguise. In this case, total frequency is obviously 20 plus 30 plus 40 plus 10, which is 100. So bar charts are really easy, and this is a conventional bar chart you'll come across. Sometimes you can have a case where the bars are drawn horizontally, basically. So you can have the frequency here in some cases, and you have the categories on the vertical axis. So you can have category A here, B here, and C here. So this could be one bar, this could be another bar, and this is another bar. So in this case, you can think of the length of the bars or height view. Well, let's stick with length. The length of the bar as representing a frequency. You can also see this. Well, let's think of a height anyway. Height of this bar. Well, length of this bar being represented by whatever that frequency value is. And the length of this bar representing some frequency value. So here maybe we have 10, here we have 12 or 14. You know, you can determine the frequencies for each category. And that's pretty much everything you need to know about bar charts. They're really easy to construct and interpret. So we're just going to have a look at another example. So in this example, we're going to have to construct a bar chart from a frequency distribution table. You've seen this table before because we've used it in another example. So some scientists were asked to name their preferred energy source. And from this table, you can tell that 12 scientists chose solar energy, 12 chose fossil fuel based energy, 10 chose wind based energy, and 2 chose nuclear based energy. So what we want to do is plot a bar chart that represents this information. In this solution, I'm going to construct a conventional bar chart where I use vertical bars. On the vertical axis, I'm going to have frequencies. And since I have the highest value is 12, so I'm just going to have something starting from 0 and ending at, well, starting from 0 and having 12. So I'm just going to move in twos. 0, 2, 4, 6, 8. Maybe a different color for 10, just so it stands out next to this frequency. So this is 10, 12. And I have how many categories? 1, 2, 3, and 4. Each category, you can easily identify categories by the basically groups, well-defined subsets that have frequencies. So one is for solar. So I'm going to have a bar representing solar, another one representing fossil fuel, another one representing wind-based energy sources, and another one representing nuclear-based energy sources. Now usually it's good practice to make the bars of equal widths, but because it's going to be a rough sketch, I may not be able to achieve that. But the key thing now is that you plot a bar with a height that corresponds to a frequency of 12. So I'm going to use different colors for the different groups. So I'm going to stop at 12. So this means that 12 scientists chose solar energy based sources. For fossil fuel is also 12. So the two bars are going to have the same height. For wind, it's going to be 10. So it's going to have a smaller height than the other bars we've drawn. So I'm sure you've seen a diagram like this. This must be something you've done before. And then for the category nuclear energy sources, there are only 2 people that chose. So the frequency is 2. So I'm drawing a vertical bar with the height that corresponds to a frequency of 2. Here's 2 here. So height like this. And we have now a bar chart that represents the information here. From the bar chart, you can tell that 12 scientists chose solar energy, 12 chose fossil. So these bars should be of the same height. This is a rough sketch, of course. 10 scientists chose wind energy and 2 chose nuclear. And that's the same information that's on this table. So this bar chart was just used to give a diagram rather than a table that just represents the same information. I mean, from this bar chart, you can easily and quickly tell that nuclear energy based sources had fewer selection, while solar and fossil fuel based energy sources had the highest number of selections. So constructing bar charts is really easy. The conventional one is where you have frequency on the vertical axis and categories on the horizontal axis, and you basically draw vertical bars whose heights correspond to the frequency of the category being represented by that vertical bar. Here's another example, and it says the sales in millions of 2 car manufacturers in the first 4 months of the year 3000 are summarized below. So you know this is fictional. Just to be more specific, I mean the number of car sales. So it tells you how many million cars these 2 manufacturers sold. Here's the information summarized in this table here. In the first row, we have months. So January, February, March, and April. Second row, I have the number of cars sold by manufacturer A. In the third row, we have the number of cars sold by manufacturer B. So manufacturer A is the first car manufacturer, and manufacturer B is the second car manufacturer. By saying that car sales in millions, 1 here means that manufacturer A sold 1 million cars in January. 1.1 here means manufacturer A sold 1.1 million cars In February, 1.1 million cars is the same thing as 1,100,000 cars. 1.2 here means manufacturer A sold 1.2 million cars in March. 1.4 here means manufacturer B sold 1.4 million cars in the month of February. So we're required to represent the given data on a bar chart, and we're required to use the bar chart to determine the total sales of manufacturer A. Really easy questions. So let's use this vertical and horizontal axis here to plot our bar charts. First thing we need to identify are the categories. In this case, categories are the months: January, February, March, and April. They have frequencies associated with them. So if you just ignore manufacturer B for now, you can say, well, the category here, January, has the frequency 1, which is 1 million. February has a frequency of 1.1 million. And by frequency, I'm just saying the number of cars sold is sort of a frequency in the sense that it tells you how often something occurred. So on the vertical axis, instead of writing frequency, we can write number of cars sold. Number of cars sold in millions. MN represents millions, just a short form of millions. So as you know, on the horizontal axis we'll have our categories. So in this case we have 4 months, so January, and there'll be a vertical bar representing information associated with the month of January. So let's start plotting the bars. You know that for manufacturer A, the number of cars sold is 1. So what we need to do first of all is actually label the axis. As you can see, the numbers range from 1 to 1.5. So what I'm going to do is just have something like, I'm going to start from 1 actually here, then have 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, and I believe 1.5 was the largest number of sales we had in any month. And I'm just going to put a squiggly line here just to show that I skipped, it's because you know the vertical axis will start from the origin with a 0. This squiggly line here, which I'll just show in red instead of blue, just to show that I've skipped some numbers on the axis and just jumped from 0 straight to 1. Because if you can look at my axis, I've used an interval of 0.1. Here we have an interval of 0.1, 0.1, 0.1, 0.1. But between 0 and 1, the interval is 1. So this squiggly line just shows that I have skipped some numbers on the axis. So for the month of January, manufacturer A sold 1 million cars. So I'm going to draw a bar for manufacturer A. I'm going to use blue, well, let's use red. I'm going to use red bars for manufacturer A. So manufacturer A. So I'll just do this. I have a key here. This means, well, let's have something like this. This represents manufacturer A. That should be an R. And I'll use green to represent, or gray rather, to represent manufacturer B. So in the month of January, manufacturer B sold 1.5 million cars. So it's going to draw a bar next to this one, or just right next to it. The height corresponding to 1.5. So I can shade this. And I'm going to move on to the next month, which is February. In the month of February, manufacturer A sold 1.1 million cars, manufacturer B sold 1.4 million cars. So red for manufacturer A, which is 1.1. So the height of this bar is going to correspond to 1.1 on this axis. And for manufacturer B, the height of the bar must correspond to 1.4. So 1.4 is here. Month of March, 1.2 and 1.3, 1.2 for manufacturer A, so I'll quickly do that. 1.2 somewhere around here. And for manufacturer B, it's 1.3. And then the month of April, 1.3 and 1.2. So just extending axis. It's April here. 1.3. And 1.2 for manufacturer B. So 1.2 somewhere here. So I'll just say it. And we're done. So let me just review what we've just done. There's a table here with categories, which are months. These categories have frequencies ascribed to them. There's a frequency for manufacturer A. This frequency represents the number of cars sold by A. For manufacturer B as well, there's another frequency. So what we did was draw a vertical and horizontal axis, label the vertical axis with number of cars sold in millions. So 1.2 here means 1.2 million. 1.3 here means 1.3 million, so on. On the horizontal axis, we have the months. So in January, which covers these two bars, the red bar represents manufacturer A's information. The gray bar represents manufacturer B's information. So just by looking at the month of January, you can see that manufacturer A sold 1 million cars and manufacturer B sold 1.5 million cars. Similarly, you can see that the results for manufacturer A and B are grouped in the months, and the bars are next to each other, just show the distinction between months. So these two bars represent information for January, these two bars represent information for February, these two bars represent information for March, and so on. So that's really easy. The next thing is to use the bar chart to determine the total sales of manufacturer A. Now, for the first 4 months, you can see that manufacturer A sold 1 million in January, 1.1 in Feb, 1.3 in April, 1.2 in March. So if you wanted to determine the total sales of manufacturer A for the first 4 months, all you have to do is just add up all these numbers here. And this gives 2.1, well 1 plus 1.1 is 2.1, 2.1 plus 1.2 is 3.3, and 3.3 plus 1.3 is 4.6. Now what I did was just use the table. For sometimes you could just be given the bar chart, and you could be given a description of the scenario. We already know what the scenario is. This is just representing the number of cars sold by 2 different manufacturers in certain months of the year. Well, the number of cars sold in millions. So by just using the bar chart to determine the total sales, so the total number of cars, that's what I mean, of manufacturer A, all we have to do is determine the height of the bars for manufacturer A. Manufacturer A is represented by the red bars. The height here is 1, the height here is 1.1, the height here is 1.2, and the height here is 1.3. So all we have to do is just add the values. It's similar to what I just did with the table. So 1 plus 1.1 is 2.1, plus 1.2 gives 3.3, plus 1.3 gives 4.6. And we're done.